You're listening to Recovery Survey, the podcast that shatters stigmas around different types of addictions and takes a deep dive into spiritual principles.
My favorite saying that I like to tell people is what we do, recovering addicts, recovering alcoholics, recovering addicts of any addiction, honestly, is not easy. It's not easy what we're doing.
My guest today is named Chris Hunter. He goes by the name Tuna. You might know him from One Podcast at a Time. Welcome to the show, Tuna.
Well, I am Chris Hunter, aka Tuna, of the One Podcast at a Time, and I do another podcast, The American Divide. But I guess most importantly, I am a recovering addict with 10 years clean. Side note, I'm a U.S. Army veteran diagnosed with PTSD. I did one stay at a rehab / VA hospital in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, and that's how I initially got clean 10 years ago. And that's who I am. That's a very brief...
Yeah, welcome to the show, man. And congratulations on 10 years. You celebrated here pretty recently.
Yeah, October 12th, and then my anniversary obviously was in 2010. So, 2010 was a rough year for me, and it looks like 2020 has also been a rough year for all of us.
Absolutely, man. I think everybody's pretty exhausted by 2020.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I don't know about down your way, but up here, it feels like the meetings and the program is getting thin. I feel like a lot of people are going back out, and it concerns me.
Yeah, it's definitely the same here, man. We have a lot of empty chairs.
Yeah. My home group in particular, we used to get a crowd of, anywhere from 30 to 40 people, and I live right outside of Philadelphia, so that's a pretty normal crowd for us. And these days, I think it's rare that we break double digits, So, not good.
Same here. I think the last meeting I went to, I think we had 4 people in attendance, and usually it'd be probably 20. So, yeah, definitely feeling the effects of COVID.
So, what would you like to know?
If you don't mind, I'd love to take a little trip back to 2010 and hear a little bit about what it was like in active addiction and how you ended up going to treatment and that whole time period.
Sure. At the end of my run, I was, I don't know, I'm not promoting how much drugs I've used, but I will say that I was doing about 3 Oxycontin, 80 milligram Oxycontins a day, or maybe twice a day if I could afford it, because I was selling all my belongings and robbing people. I sometimes hesitate to say that, but that's the truth, is I did do that. And when I couldn't afford those expensive pills, I would buy benzos, like your Klonopins and, whatever I could find, really. It was bad, it was pretty bad. I don't think that I ever necessarily lived on the streets, but I was definitely using people so that I could sleep on their couches and get by and not be completely homeless. But I certainly didn't have a home of my own where I paid bills and I earned my way. At the time, my mother, who is a recovering addict, was checking on me every day. And honestly, I think she feared that I was going to overdose. And I guess I should mention that I kind of did attempt to overdose. At one point, I think I took maybe 12 or 15 2 milligram Klonopins. But yeah, I took a very large amount of benzos and just kind of hoped I wasn't going to wake up. And I did, but she found out about it, and she was very worried that, that I wasn't gonna. So she was calling me and checking on me every day. I got to a point where I sold pretty much everything that was worth of any value that I owned. And I was sitting on these train tracks in like people that live in this area, they know that there's a city right below Philadelphia called Wilmington, Delaware, and it's a pretty rough town. And I was living down there with an ex-girlfriend, and I was so depressed that I went and sat on the train tracks right out back of her house. And I don't know. I don't know if I was necessarily planning on killing myself, but when my mother called me that day on October 12th, 2010, I was in tears and I was just kind of like worn out. I couldn't get any more drugs because I didn't have any means to get money. So she called and she said, "Are you done? Like, are you really done this time? Like, are you ready to just go and just get clean and try something different?" I broke down and I said, "Yeah, yeah, I am." And my mom knew that as a veteran, I was entitled to certain benefits through the VA hospital. She had already made contact with the VA about what they could do. She wanted to try to forcefully put me into their system and force me through rehab. And I'm laughing because I don't know about where you live, but where I live, you can't force an addict to do anything they don't want to do, and I'm definitely no exception to that rule. When she asked me if I was ready, that's what she did. She left work early that day and came and got me and drove me all the way to this place, which was about an hour away. That was it, man. We checked into the VA hospital. They had to put me on a heart monitor for a couple weeks because I was taking so many benzos that they had to taper me down with Ativan because if I stopped taking them just cold turkey, they said I could have had a stroke or seizures and died. So, the fun, man, the good stuff, the DTs. um, I don't know. I kind of have like a rotten sense of humor. I like hearing about, people coming down and the struggle, the sickness, because I think we earned it. I've definitely experienced some ugly withdrawal symptoms. And now looking back, I laugh about it because I think that life is all about consequences. And, you reap what you sow. And sometimes you got to deal with it. And yeah, it was ugly. And I got some funny stories out of it now. But at the time, it was horrible, and I'm not laughing at people that experience it. But I hope that someday they can look back and find humor in it and maybe some strength out of it. So I went up to the VA hospital and I lived there for I think about 2.5 months. It was I think I did Thanksgiving up there and I came home right before Christmas, if I recall correctly. So I went up there, I did that, and then the whole time we had H&I people coming in there and they were helping us. They were having meetings for us, for one fellowship or another, and I kind of subscribed to one fellowship that dealt more with drug addiction, and I made my mind up that when I did decide to leave the hospital, that's where I was going to try to make my efforts at. So when I finally did get released, I went back to Wilmington and was living with the girl that I was dating at the time. I did start attending meetings, but I had a very difficult time connecting at first, and I think a lot of people do. I will say this, when I came home, I remember one of the counselors at the hospital once said to me, she said, "Chris, you're dealing with PTSD also, and maybe something you can do to create a little discipline in your life and in companionship is to get a dog." I did. I have this little pit bull mix, Morgan, who's been by my side ever since. I think that was very therapeutic. I don't think it necessarily fixed all of my addiction problems, but I think with the regimen of doing my 90 and 90s and trying to dig into the program. Plus, I held myself accountable that my dog relied on me. I had to wake up early and walk her and feed her. I had to get home right after work to take care of her. I think it was the structure that I needed in that beginning, to get back into it. That somebody was relying on me, because I don't know about anybody else, but in my early days, it wasn't enough for me to get clean just for me because I didn't have enough self worth. I didn't think I was worth anything. In the early days, that was very important to me. I'll admit it, I did it for my dog. But it grew into something bigger than that, Like I think that showed me unconditional love. After a while I started to realize this weird pattern, almost like how we describe a higher power is if I had a horrible day and I was mean and nasty and grumpy and yelling, the dog still loved me. No matter what, the dog loved me. The dog was excited to see me. You know, that was my little buddy and still is. That was important in the beginning to understand that. And I dealt with so much in my life that, I think a lot of the times I hear in my meetings that the drugs were just a symptom. And I think that's extremely true in my case. I didn't think very highly of myself. I admittedly thought that I was the ugliest person in the whole world, and I know that that sounds very eccentric and maybe, I don't know. At the time, though, that's kind of how I felt about myself. I did not like the way I looked. I would wear hoodies and baseball caps and pull them down over my face. There was so much work in learning to love myself. I remember my first sponsor, that's what he used to tell me. He's like, why you always wear a hat? Why don't you spin your hat around so we can see your face? So that was my early days, though, man. That was, I spent some time at the VA hospital. I climbed the walls there. I like calling withdrawal climbing the walls because I tried to get clean before, and I did it at my mom's house once, and I just went cold turkey off of opiates. I was sick as a dog, and I was from all ends, and I was tired but couldn't sleep, and all the good stuff. And I remember this one moment where I woke up in the middle of the night. There was a movie by William Dafoe that was playing. It's called To Live and Die in L.A., and there was this scene from the movie where there's this red flashing light and this crazy music in the background, like, and I woke up like screaming, thinking that I was like in a mental asylum or something. And I'm like, I actually had like, I think I was probably like in my late 20s, and I'm like screaming, and I woke up my mom sleeping in the room next door, and she's telling me to shut the F up, and yeah, craziness, man, craziness, addict stuff. Yeah, so I love good withdrawal stories, man. If anybody's got any good withdrawal stories, please send them my way. I want to hear them.
I don't know that mine's anything special. I detoxed in county jail, so that was pretty interesting.
Oh, that's yeah. I do recall from our show though that I think it's interesting just being in your background and your relatives and stuff. It's still good stuff, man. It's a part of the requirements of getting clean. I think is that you have to deal with the consequences, and it's not going to be fun. Yeah, so that's my how I got there. Now, as for my recovery, I'll say this: I had a hard time in the beginning. When I first got to the fellowship that I belonged to, I was not as extroverted as I am now. In fact, the fact that I host a podcast was a huge step in my life also because I used to get extremely shy when I publicly spoke. And even when I was in a room alone, recording my own episodes, I would get extremely nervous and stage fright. And so the moral of that is that 10 years ago, when I would show up to a meeting, I would sit in the furthest corner and I wouldn't associate with anybody else in the room. Either they did way more drugs than I did and I was nothing like them because they were junkies and I wasn't, or I did more drugs than them, and they're a pussy, and I'm sorry for cursing, but I used to think that they're a pussy and they they shouldn't be here because they haven't fell hard enough. And that's toxic thinking. Nowadays, when I meet people and they suggest things like that, I tell them right off the bat that that's not what we're doing here. That's bad thinking. That's how people die. So yeah, so in the beginning, I didn't talk to anybody, and I would say for about a year, I sat in the back and kind of white knuckled it and just held on to the seat and didn't talk and didn't have a sponsor. I didn't do any of the step work. I didn't have anybody to do step work with. It took quite a lot for me to get out of my comfort zone and to actually communicate with like-minded people, because I didn't want to believe that they were the same as me.
Yeah, I think that's a trap that a lot of us fall into, especially in the beginning, is trying to compare ourselves to other people. And I think for me, one of the reasons that I was trying to do it is I was trying to disqualify myself. I hadn't gotten to the point where I realized that I was an addict, and it was like, I'm here to get my paper signed for probation. I'm not like you guys. And I guess in my mind, I thought if I wasn't an addict, then when I got off probation, I could go back to doing what I was doing before. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that about having that closed mind and trying to find the differences and trying to compare how much I use to this person or what substances I use compared to this person, and that whole kind of idea of like, I guess like a scale or a chart of like what's worse or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, in the beginning, it's so easy to disqualify everybody in the room. I remember specifically my first thought is that when I do get a sponsor, the sponsor needs to be a veteran, because veterans only see the world the same as other veterans, and we experience the same things. I think it's tribalism. And in its core nature, we are looking for a tribe that best fits who we are, and we just don't realize yet that this room is our tribe. All of the people in here, whether they're black or Hispanic or Asian, if they're a woman or a man or, transgender, gay, doesn't matter what religion, doesn't matter anything. All of these people, this is my tribe, you know? And I will say this, one of my biggest fears with this most recent election, and I'm not here to talk about politics. I've noticed that politics found its way into my meetings in particular, and it's dividing people up, and I don't like that, because it shouldn't, that's not what I come to my fellowship to do. I don't care who you vote for. We're here to all help each other get clean. I don't know if you've experienced that, but up here there's some, you know, hard left and hard right, hard headed people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's part of the beauty of the traditions, if we adhere to them, is that we're all the same when we're in the rooms. It doesn't, like you were saying, it doesn't matter what we look like, what our ethnicity is, religious views, any of that, political views. And I think there's something to be said about what you're talking about, tribalism, for people in recovery and people that aren't in recovery. I think a lot of people fall into that category or that mindset of tribalism, just like you're talking about, far left, far right.
Yeah,
Everybody finds a tribe, and then it's you're in that tribe and ride or die. Like,
yeah. And I don't want to go to a meeting that is all one direction or another, politically or religiously or whatever. I don't want to have to find a meeting like that. I want to just go to any meeting and know that I'm in a safe place, and I hope that anybody that does listen to this, that I encourage you to not ostracize people that don't think like you, because at the end of the day, it doesn't, whatever happens outside the rooms doesn't pertain. We're here to discuss addiction, and we're here to help each other regardless. I have personally witnessed It was a while ago. It was a few years ago, but I actually witnessed a very, very serious white supremacist, slowly kind of back away from some of his beliefs. And I kind of witnessed him opening up to African Americans in the room, and I was quite thrown off. And honestly, this is a kind of person that he was very intimidating. I was intimidated, and I don't get intimidated very easily. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I pride myself on being somewhat of a tough person, but this was the kind of guy that I wasn't willing to play around with. But in the end, we actually did have some very good conversations. Unfortunately, I haven't seen him in quite a while, but the last few conversations I remember having with him, he said that he just didn't have the luxury of bringing his personal beliefs down into the rooms, and I thought that that was amazing. That's the way it should be. So I don't know how we got onto this hard political conversation, and I truly apologize.
It's all good, man. It's all good.
I guess I just sound like one of them hippie guys nowadays. I just want all of us to get along, man.
Well, I think it's an important topic, especially in the current climate that we're in, and to remind people not to bring that stuff into the rooms. I remember early on in my recovery, I was struggling with the higher power concept, and there were a couple of people that would endorse specific religions in meetings, and it was a big turnoff. And then I got to read some literature a little bit more, and some old timers made some comments about, we're not here to push a specific religion, or we're not here to talk about that kind of stuff. And that kind of reassured me, like, okay, I'm good. Like, I can still figure this thing out, and I don't have to listen to this outside information that people are bringing in. And I think a lot of that, at least for my home group, comes because of where we are. We rent a room from a church, so a lot of people associate
Sure.
our meeting with the church, with the building that we're in, and so we've made an effort, the core members, the trusted servants, we make an effort to let people know, like, hey, we're renting this room. We're not affiliated with this church. We're not affiliated with any religion, and we try to make an effort to let newcomers know that just because we're in this building doesn't mean that we subscribe to their views, and in our fellowship you're allowed to pick your own higher power.
Sure. And that's extremely important. I have witnessed newcomers, damn near get chased out of the rooms because they just, some of us old timers, and I guess I fall into that category now. It sucks getting old, and it certainly the old hurts, but I guess my amount of clean time is a part of my pride, but it also gave me some kind of clarity towards the way our fellowship is. And, I think, at least from my perspective, I usually try to suggest to a newcomer just to have a seat and try not to overthink it. And I've heard some people suggest that you need a sponsor tonight. You should start working on your first step like tonight. You need to get like deeply involved. Do a 90 and 90 right now. Start right now. Tomorrow, where are you going to be? Well, let's go to a meeting. And it may work for some people, but there are some people out there that have never experienced a strict, disciplined, or regiment in their life, and that might be extremely overwhelming to them. From my perspective, I usually just try to suggest just have a seat, share if you want to. And when you're ready, there's good people in here that want to help you. The 12 steps are not something to be afraid of. The parts where they mention God, I'm not a godly person. I don't subscribe to any religion. And I'm not downing people that do. I'm just suggesting that for me, at this moment in my life, my particular fellowship is my higher power. They're a collection of people that we can see the success. Like if I'm going to be a pragmatic person, I can look at the elders of my community and see their success. Therefore, I can use that as a guidelines of this is something I can believe in, and that's what I do. I'm not saying everybody has to do that. That's me.
Good stuff, man. I like the simplistic approach, and I think that's one of the gifts of recovery is we can just follow a few simple suggestions. We don't have to overcomplicate it, and I know that's difficult to do. At least from my personal experience, being an addict, I like to overcomplicate things, but man, I like that simple approach of just take a seat, listen, share if you want to, like not trying to force all these ideas and stuff on somebody when they're new. Because at least for me, when I was in my active addiction, I didn't have any kind of structure to my life. I went where I wanted, I did what I wanted. I showed up to work sometimes. I didn't have any kind of structure, and I think if someone had been real stern and told me you need to do this, you need to do that, I probably wouldn't have taken it well. Actually, as a matter of fact, I'm thinking back on it. My first meeting was at a different fellowship. One of the old guys that was there was very stern and was telling me, you need to do this, you need to do that. And is like, you know what, screw you. I'm out of here, man. Like, I'm not coming back.
Yeah, it's too much, man. That's like we say, easy does it, man. Like I think that's about as simple as it is. And you know, I'm just as guilty as anybody. I overcomplicate my life. With as much time as I have, I now have the luxury of planning out an absurd amount of tasks in one day. And somehow I manage to accomplish maybe not all of them, but the majority of them. But that's after a whole lot of work on myself and developing. And I think in the beginning, we have these high ambitions of, maybe we lost a spouse or lost our children to child protective services or whatever, and they want to gain that back like that first day. And I have bad news is it's not possible. This is a very kind of slow process, but it's extremely rewarding. Here I am sitting in this beautiful home that my wife and I purchased, and we had to develop a plan on how we were going to be able to afford this house. It's my favorite saying that I like to tell people is what we do, recovering addicts, recovering alcoholics, recovering addicts of any addiction, honestly, is not easy. It's not easy what we're doing, and if anybody's telling you that it's easy, they're still they still haven't figured it out yet. They don't know what they're talking about. It's not easy what we're doing, but I promise you it's better. I would put $1,000 on the table and bet you that in 2 years' time, your life is going to be much better. Much better. It may not be easier. Maybe your credit is still dog shit. Maybe your job sucks or you're having a hard time getting a job. Maybe you're struggling because the economy shut down, But the way you will feel about your personal self is going to be better. It's going to be a lot better. The interpersonal relationships that I have with my family, the fact that I have a wife and children now is all due to me getting clean and working on myself with the 12 steps and a sponsor and sitting in a metal chair for 10 years every week at least. Sometimes I slacked and missed a week here and there, but that's all I did.
I love hearing the messages of hope from people that have changed their life, that have, surrendered and worked a program, and they're starting to reap the rewards of that new way of life, man. I can just echo what you said. If you have any doubts, like your life is going to get immensely better not using. I mean, I can only speak for my own personal experience, but I mean, my life is so much better today than I ever imagined it would be. And it hasn't been easy and it's not always fun, but, it beats the alternative. So I really appreciate you sharing that hope and encouragement.
Yeah, man. You know what? Let me say this because I am a big fan of being honest nowadays, and I don't want anybody listening to this to think that here's this guy that is doing everything exactly as suggested. So let me tell on myself right now, okay? I'm actually only on my fourth step. I struggled for a long time with doing the step work, and I took a long break between 3 and 4 because my life got busy. And I don't believe in excuses nowadays. Maybe I was just lazy or putting it on the back burner and not making it a priority. But I will tell you this. I've actively dived back into my step work and realized, that this is something I need to do. I haven't finished my 12 steps. I'm very, honestly, relatively still new in my step work. And a lot of my clean time was just maintaining and just sitting in the chair. So I have to be honest about that. And I don't want people to think that I'm some guru, of the 12 steps. I'm not. I'm a guy that makes mistakes. I've done stupid things. I've dated in the program. I've dated newcomers. I've almost relapsed because I've chased after women that were on their way to relapse, and I thought I was going to save them. Thank God, I turned back when I did and just realized I was living in insanity. I don't think that there is a perfect recovering addict. I think we're all making mistakes here and there. But I didn't use, so I'm still here, and I think my clean time still counts. So that's me, man. That's Tuna.
I can't remember if you've told the story on your podcast or not, but if you have, I don't remember. I'm just curious about where the nickname Tuna came from.
Listen, now I have to ask before I tell a crude story, because it is a crude joke. Are your listeners okay with this? So when I started working at the shipyard up here in Philadelphia, which, by the way, was a huge milestone in my life. I think I had maybe a couple years clean or 3 years clean. And at that point in my life, I bullshitted my way into every job I ever had. And shortly after, the boss usually realized that I bullshitted and I wasn't quite capable of doing what I promised. And the shipyard, for me, was this golden opportunity to learn a real trade and make a career out of it. That was the goal anyway, or at the very least use it as a stepping stone. So this is a very long-winded story. I apologize. So when I applied, they they liked the fact that I was a veteran, and I had to take a test, and I did really well on the aptitude test. I got approved to do this apprenticeship program for welding and ship fitting. So the beginning of it, when I started doing the apprenticeship, is I had to go to this weld class in the shipyard for about 3 months straight, and I was there with 10 other guys, and they were my classmates, and we got pretty close, and we used to joke around a lot and talk shit, because shipyard workers are a lot like sailors or soldiers or any other, group of guys sitting around talking shit all day long. One of my friends, this gentleman from the Carolinas, was a older black gentleman, and we were all bullshitting about the lengths of our members. At least they were anyway. And he was kind of a taller fella, but his buddy was shorter. This other guy was a little shorter, and they were laughing and they were joking. They were like, "Oh, you white guys and your little ones." And I said, "Nah, man, you're the same height as me. Don't bullshit me, dude." And he was like, "Well, what does that mean?" And I said, "Well, listen, man, humans are in proportion to themselves, okay? A giraffe has a long neck and long legs because that's what giraffes are. A tall human has tall everything, okay? That's the way that works. Short humans have short legs and short arms and short everything else." So they started cracking up. They thought that was hilarious, and they said, "Well, Tuna, you're a short little stocky guy. What are you, like a soda can?" They didn't call me Tuna then. They said, "What are you, like a soda can?" I said, "You guys have no imagination." I said, "I'm like a tuna can." So that's where it started at, is I actually made my own nickname accidentally. And then from then on, they thought they were making fun of me by calling me Tuna and Tuna Can. But I just laughed it off because I like good comedy. And it literally became my name at the shipyard where 1,100 guys worked at, and nobody knew who my name was other than Tuna. So that's the story of Tuna. And now the first show that I started was called Yardbird, Tuna, because a shipyard worker is sometimes referred to as a yardbird, especially a guy like me that talks too much and makes crude jokes. We're yardbirds. We're sitting around squawking all day, you know? So that's where that name came from.
That's a great story, man. We're kind of reaching the end of the show. I usually like to open it up and let the guests share whatever they have on their heart. The floor is yours, man.
I appreciate it. All right, so I don't know if you guys can hear it right now, but my wife and children are running around back and forth upstairs. Now, when I usually record my podcast down here, I am severely irritated and annoyed and ready to go yell at them. But I'm gonna share how honestly I'm grateful for that. You know, I'm grateful that I have a 1.5-year-old upstairs that loves her little brother, who is only a month old. He was born premature and very small. And my wife, that when I forget that I agreed to do an interview for a podcast and I tell her 30 minutes prior, oh, by the way, I got to run downstairs because I totally forgot, you know, and my phone just reminded me. So, you know, my wife is always, you know, extremely understanding and encourages me to do these things because I think she knows in some kind of way that this keeps me away from doing other stupid things. I'm a very grateful person. I tell a lot of dumb jokes and I'm crude sometimes and I like to troll the internet sometimes. But the real me, the real person that I am, is extremely grateful. You know, once upon a time I was borderline homeless and suicidal. I honestly was suicidal and I didn't own anything. I sold the little bit of belongings that I had just to get high. And here I am now in this beautiful home, you know, with a great career and a beautiful family. And I feel like I'm about to sing that song by I can't remember the name of the song. Oh my God, it's like going off in my head right now. Oh, I'm gonna have to send it to you, Brett. I truly apologize. That's the worst thing to do to somebody. It's bad, man. Sorry, but I feel gratitude. You know, that's really who I am. I'm a very grateful person, and just happy to be alive. You know, and I'm enjoying this. So that's all I got for you, brother. I don't know if that was wisdom or not, man. Hopefully your listeners don't give you a bunch of negative feedback about this guy from Philadelphia.
Do you want to plug your podcasts or social media or anything like that?
All right. I guess if you guys want to hear some crude humor with my co-host occasionally saying wonderful things, you could check us out at One Podcast at a Time. And then if by some chance you have a problem with discussing politics when you probably should not, I have a podcast about that too, and that's called The American Divide. And I'm just Chris Hunter. I'm a guy that if you reach out to me and say that you're struggling, I will answer the phone. I don't care if I don't know you. I don't care if you're on the other side of the country. If you're hurting and you need to talk, you know, find me. I'm available and I will listen. Because I think sometimes that's all we need is just somebody to listen to us. That's all I got for you, brother.
Well, I appreciate it, man. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, man. You keep up the great work, dude. I like the show. I love it, man.
Tuna, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Congratulations again on 10 years clean. Be sure to check out his show, One Podcast at a Time. You've been listening to Recovery Survey. If you got anything out of today's episode, I'd ask you to please leave us a 5-star review and share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can find us at recoverysurvey.com. You can listen to all of our episodes on the website as well as connect with us on social media where you can get previews for upcoming episodes.